In this video, we're going to focus on the main differences between plants and animal cells. As you can see here, we said that plant cells contain all the organelles that animal cells contain, so nucleus, ER, Golgi body, mitochondrion, vacuole, vesicle, but not ribosomes. They contain cell membranes, ribosomes, skeleton, cytoplasm. We saw that they do have a bit of a difference in terms of their vacuole, what that looks like, but there are some more differences that we have to see. So we're going to take a look at the three main differences between plant and animal cells. You should know how to label a plant cell as well, just like we saw how to label the animal cell. You'll see that all the parts are basically the same, with the exception of a few other parts. And they might be in different locations, and that's normal. You have to get a sense of what they look like. Just a main point here, if you label this as a lysosome in this cell, this would be wrong. This would have to be called a vesicle. If you label it as a vacuole in this cell, this would also be wrong, because the vacuole of the plant is much larger. So there's a central vacuole in a plant cell, not a small vacuole. So that's where they're not so much interchangeable, is in plant cells. Okay, so our difference one. So again, here's the animal cell, here's a plant cell. If you look very closely over here, there's another organelle, looks like this. So don't get this confused with the mitochondrion. Here's the mitochondrion, looks like a little jelly bean with some little zigzag patterns in there. This is the chloroplast over here. The chloroplast is only found in plant cells for now, not in animal cells. And the chloroplast is responsible for doing photosynthesis. So mitochondria, they would break down sugar to release energy. Chloroplasts sort of do the opposite. If you look at their equation here, the reaction of photosynthesis, the plant takes carbon dioxide and water and energy and puts it all together to make sugar. So rather than break sugar, the plant makes the sugar. And now there's stored energy in here that if you eat a plant or something that ate the plant, you could take it, send it to your mitochondria, break it open, and release the energy that was stored in there. So it's almost like the plant packages the sugars up for other things, including itself, to use. And also you'll notice that it makes oxygen, the oxygen that we all breathe in as animals. So that's what the chloroplast is for. It's to do photosynthesis. Now also just notice that plant cells do have mitochondria as well. A lot of students think they don't, but they do. So what's different is the plant cell makes its own sugar through the chloroplast and then sends it to the mitochondrion to break it open to use the energy. Animals can't make their own sugar. There's no chloroplast. So animals have to go eat to find their sugar and their fuel. Plants can make their own sugar. That's why a plant doesn't have to go eat. It can make its own sugar using the chloroplast, then send it to mitochondria for cellular respiration. So keep that in mind. Don't fall for that misconception. Chloroplasts are the first major difference between plants and animals, or animals and plants. Here's a zoomed in picture of the chloroplast. You can see these little discs in here. They all play different parts. There's multiple membranes as well for the chloroplast. You'll learn more about the chloroplast in grade 12 as well, and photosynthesis, just like you would about cellular respiration in the mitochondria. Our next difference is this. So here we have our animal cell. The animal cell's outer covering is the cell membrane. The plant cell also has a cell membrane made up of phospholipid bilayers and everything, determines what comes in and out. But in addition to that, there's an extra layer of covering on the plant cell, the green over here. So the outer covering, that's called the cell wall. The cell wall is a rigid outer layer. It's a strong, rigid, hard outer layer that offers extra protection and support for the plant. So it gives the plant, it makes the plant stronger, allows it to stand upright. It's a defense mechanism as well against herbivores that are trying to eat it. But understand that animals don't have that, but plants do. The cell wall is often made up of a sugar called cellulose. When you eat fruits and vegetables, the cellulose is often dietary fiber that you eat to help keep you more regular. That's what that actually is. It's part of the cell wall. So again, an outer covering called the cell wall, which animals don't have. You saw earlier that prokaryotes actually do have a cell wall as well, but it's made of different things. So even though some organisms might have cell walls in common, they might have different. They might be made up of different parts. Keep that in mind. So here you can see the cell membrane on the inside, cell wall on the outside. And then the other difference we already saw was the vacuole. The animal cell has many small vacuoles inside of it, whereas a plant cell has a large central vacuole because it needs more storage since it can't move around. So to store a lot of water and pigments that might give the plant color, for example, all that's stored in the central vacuole, the largest organelle within a plant. So what I want you to start thinking about is these organelles and understanding that a cell needs the right organelles to do its job properly. So different cells in your body have different jobs, and what that means is they'll need different tools. Just like different people have different professions. So if you have a hairdresser might need different tools to do their job compared to, let's say, a teacher. A hairdresser might need scissors, so you'd see a lot of scissors in the hairdresser's work environment. A teacher might need maybe whiteboards and whiteboard markers, so you'll see a lot more of those in the teacher's work environment. So there's specialized tools that allow the teachers and hairdressers to do their specific jobs. It's the same thing with cells. Different cells do different things in your body. Muscle cells, for example, they need a lot of energy to do work. They need to contract, they need to allow you to move, so they need a lot of energy. They need to somehow break down fuel to get a lot of energy. So, thinking about that, which organelle would you expect muscle cells to have a lot of? Because different cells have different amounts of different organelles depending on what they need. So think about which organelle a muscle cell would need to have if it needs to basically have access to lots of energy. So pause it, try it. If you said the mitochondrion or mitochondria, that's correct. Because mitochondria take sugar, break it down, release energy, which is what your muscle cells need. Now let's suppose there's a cell in your body that needs to make a lot of protein, a lot of immune proteins, or a lot of proteins to go out to other cells. If it has to make a lot of protein, which organelle would you expect it to have a lot of? There's a few different answers you can put here, but I'm looking for one main answer. That's right. If you said the ribosome, you're correct, because the ribosome makes protein. So when you're asked a question like this, an application question like this, think about what is a cell's job in the question. Okay, and then think about which organelle is responsible for doing that in a cell. And that's usually your answer. So again, cells need the right tools. The tools are the organelles to do their job. Now, the word we're going to use in biology for a job is a function. Okay? And when I talk about the right tools and organelles, usually I'll say the structure. So the cell needs the right structure to do its function. So the structure allows the cell to do its function. So this cell here, its structure is that it has a lot of mitochondria, which allows it to do its function of essentially being a muscle cell and getting a lot of energy. This cell here, its structure is that it has a lot of ribosomes, which allows it to do the function of making protein, which is its job. So you should be able to label animal cells and plant cells, even if they look slightly different in different pictures. So you will have some practice with different pictures of plant cells and animal cells, but you'll see it all basically looks the same. So if I give you an empty picture like this, can you tell me this is the cytoskeleton? So pause the video, try to label this, and then you can take it up. You have ribosomes as the tiny dots there. The ER, the rough and the smooth, and you could tell them apart. Rough being with ribosomes closer to the nucleus, smooth farther away, no ribosomes. Cytoplasm jelly here, pointing at nothing. Mitochondria, little zigzag patterns in there, looks like a jelly bean. The vacuole over here, in animal cells, you might sometimes call that the lysosome instead, and that's okay. You might also call it a vesicle, and that's okay. But you could never call it a lysosome or a vacuole in plant cells, right? Because plant cells have no lysosomes, and they don't have small vacuoles. Golgi body, the stack of pancakes here. Nucleus with the nuclear membrane over here, and also a nucleolus in there. You should know how to label that, even though it's not labeled here. The cell membrane over here. A vesicle over here. You can do the same thing with plant cells. We have a cell membrane over here. I'll let you pause and try the rest yourself. Hopefully you've unpaused and you've tried to label this yourself at this point. Here we have the cytoplasm on the inside. Mitochondrion, little jelly bean with little zigzag patterns in there. Little dot found just over here. It's hard to see, but there's a dot there. Little dot there. Sometimes a dot can be in the cytoplasm, sometimes a dot can be on the rough ER, but there's a tiny dot there, and that's the ribosome. The ER over here, the rough and the smooth ER, okay, also found in plants. A little vesicle over here, but you can't call that a lysosome or a vacuole, because remember that plants have large vacuoles and no lysosomes. Golgi body over here. The nucleus with the nuclear membrane, nuclear pores, and nucleolus in there as well, just like in animals. The central vacuole, let's use that word central vacuole, because that's in a plant. Cytoskeleton, little hairs here, also little hairs there. Cell wall, the outer covering to make it more rigid. Chloroplast right here, right, to do photosynthesis. And so that's how to label a plant and animal cell. That's good practice for you. Here you can see different pictures, right? So sometimes we'll give you a different picture, but things look similar enough, right? You can see the mitochondria don't look very different, a little vacuole or maybe lysosome you call it here if it's an animal cell. Here's an animal cell. You can see the nucleus there. You can see the ER with little dots on it, so the ribosomes, right? Inside this term we haven't really taught you yet. Chromosomes is just another term for DNA wrapped around specialized structures. And there's a few other organelles we didn't really teach you yet, like these things called cilia, which are little hairs that allow the cells to move around. Don't worry too much about those. Focus on the ones that we taught you so far. But it doesn't hurt if you do see a picture. You can easily read and figure out what it does, because there's more organelles than just the ones that we discussed. So what's the best way to study this? It really depends on you, but really when you're trying to summarize the organelles in your notebook, draw a picture of the plant and the animal side by side. Make a Venn diagram to perhaps illustrate the differences and similarities between them. Describe their structures. Describe their functions. What do they do? What's their job? What do they look like in a cell? So if you can take a picture, if you can draw a picture of a cell like this and label all the parts, and then under the parts you briefly summarize their functions, that's a good way to study. To have pages and pages of notes is kind of hard to do. Try to consolidate it. So draw two pictures, plant and animal cell, then label the parts, and then underneath it a brief summary of what they do. It's not about necessarily memorizing everything, but it's about understanding what you're trying to memorize. Remember, some of you have different regulations and rules for your lab notebooks for the course, so please make sure to check your teacher with what they expect of you for the lab notebook specifically. But regardless, it's always a good idea to draw a picture of a plant and animal cell, label them, and then summarize the functions that they have.